Greetings, weary traveler. Come, warm yourself by the fire and let us regale you with mighty tales, tales of adventure, tales of heroism, Tales of Tamriel. I'm your host, Aggelos, and I am joined live today by Nate, aka Misa, from London itself. How are you, sir?
I've erected the spine of having a great 5 days hosting you in our fair city here. I mean, this is the first time we've ever podcasted in person.
This is true. It's actually kind of neat to be in your studio actually doing this. It's unique, I think, is a fun experience to podcast with someone in person. I know my wife and I would do this from time to time, and it was always a very interesting experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is I would say a legendary experience. Would you say? It's certainly more than epic.
Oh, totally legendary, at least. And we didn't have to use all the tempers to do it, so that was great.
No, I've got no temper at all today. But I mean, one of the reasons that you're here is because there is a Skyrim, well, an Elder Scrolls and Fallout live orchestral conference. It's not a conference. Concert taking place in London, which is like the main reason you're here. And I suggested to you before you came over, like, wouldn't it be great if we could meet the composer of Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 and a whole loads of other games, a guy called Inon Zur. And can you just remind me, did we or did we not meet him?
Well, we totally met him and got to interview him at the Bethesda office here in London, so that was a unique experience. And I'm pretty sure I'll show off some pictures at one point, because I think we both were wearing the Fallout, what is that? I can't remember the armor of it. The power suit helmet.
Yeah, the power armor helmet, yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
I think I also got a picture next to the Dovahkiin statue, which of course was a highlight of the trip, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Well, shall we jump into that interview straight away?
Yes.
Before we get into tales and news and things. Well, we started asking Inon basically how he got started in the world of composing, and to take us back to the beginning of his life, essentially. And here's what he had to say.
Music was a huge part in my life throughout, since I remember myself. I remember myself walking with my parents, and they would, when I was 3 years old or 4, and they would sing songs, and I automatically just harmonized them. It's like, wow, all right, maybe you could do a little bit more than that. So when I was 8, I started playing piano, but instead of like playing what's written, I was just composing my own stuff. So composition was always my passion for a very long time throughout my childhood, and then obviously teenager and then adulthood, and I came to the United States from Israel just to realize this dream.
And how did you transition into composing for video games? Obviously, you've got a childhood love of music and composition, but how did you end up pointing towards games as opposed to exclusively towards TV and film?
I was presented an opportunity in 1996 to compose music for games. I wasn't really keen on it because I didn't know anything about video games or music for video games. At this time, I was writing music for like TV, for kids, programming like Power Rangers and the Beetleborgs, Escaflowne, and way more. So this is what I was doing, and I thought, well, game, I don't. But I started to listen to compositions for games, and there were a lot of orchestral music, and apparently people told me that, hey, you could like record a whole live orchestra for video game scores. And I said, like, wow, this is my dream. I gotta try doing that. So I did my first video game in 1996, which was Klingon Academy, Star Wars, Star Trek, Klingon Academy, that's Star Wars.
And I think you did 3 in a row, the Star
Actually,
Trek.
Yeah, big difference. My kids will kill me.
Our listeners would kill all of us.
Exactly. Star Trek. Yeah, I started from Klingon Academy. Then I did Starfleet Command. and then I did another one which had to do with like pirates in the galaxy. And after that, I actually started doing some games that really started my sort of like almost current career. I did Icewind Dale 2 and Baldur's Gate, which were like a very classic RPG games. And this is how I was introduced into the RPG world.
I mean, Baldur's Gate. Did you play Baldur's Gate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As soon as I saw it was Icewind Dale 2. I actually have it on my phone right now because they redid it. So as soon as I heard that, I'm like, that's amazing that I get to speak with the composer of those tracks.
So obviously, you know, the games that a lot of people listening to this will know you for is the Fallout series, Fallout 76 most recently, but also Fallout 4 and Fallout 3 and so forth. So what are the creative challenges that you're faced with when composing for games as vast as these titles are?
It's a very good question, since again, you know, this is an open world experience. So the music need to cover so many aspects, and it's just so much time. And I think that Fallout 4 probably has about 3 hours of music. Fallout 76 even more, because it's a bigger world, obviously. So it's just trying to balance between writing music, like a whole score that will be cohesive enough. So it's like we're not going to move from different styles of music. We always need to keep in mind that there should be at least one or two thematic ideas that should weave around and just like be all the time there somewhere and repeat. But also, I need to create music that will be interesting enough, so when moving from place to place, when we're moving from adventure to adventure, experience to one experience to the other, really music would be able to be different enough to engage the player the same.
One more question from me before I share the microphone limelight. With games that people play for hundreds of hours, like the Fallout series and Elder Scrolls, obviously that Jeremy Soule composes for, it must be a real challenge for the music not to become repetitive and tiresome. In a game that's got a 6 or 7 hour playtime, you can get away with a song repeating itself a bit and it's okay. But Fallout 76 and Fallout 4, I mean, I put about 600-700 hours probably into Fallout 4 between the two playthroughs that I've done. So you're going to get tired of that quickly,
yeah.
if not executed well.
Well, again, there's few techniques how to get around this problem. The first technique is we don't really believe in wall-to-wall music. We think that music is it's not a background noise. It's not a sound effect. Music plays a very important emotional part inside the game. So there should be a really good reason why music suddenly begin and why it will end, how it will play, when it will play. So just making these choices, really shrinking the time that the music actually going to be present. Okay, this is one thing. The second thing is, let's say that I composed a musical cue that lasts about 4 minutes. After I compose it, I actually break it into its components. We call it stems, and it's sort of like horizontal layers. Okay. So I will give maybe only the percussions, only the strings, only woodwinds, only synthesizers, and so on and so forth. So after that, the audio director could say, hey, in this situation here, I want to hear only the strings, or only the percussions, or only the synthesizers. Now I want to hear 2 layers amongst the 5, and I want to make a variations. So basically every cue has lots of variations that can be then repeated, but not repeated because they sound totally different. So this is another way around how to get, this 700 hours of gameplay, sorted with music.
All right. Well, with Fallout 76 actually getting ready to be released, in fact, the beta test weekends are actually happening as we speak. One of the things that I was thinking of, I was listening to some of the soundtracks to Fallout 4, and Fallout has this very specific, like 1950s-esque music, and it fits with the Boston setting of 4. However, 76 being set in West Virginia, a little bit more of a backwoods type area. What kind of influences did you take to make the music for 76 to make it fit in a West Virginia setting versus Boston, which would be pretty different?
So Fallout 76, first and foremost, is very much a nature-driven music. So I took these elements from the Commonwealth, the violin, and the guitar and all of that, and just basically imagine them in a more of a natural place and not so urban place. Like in Fallout 4, it was more urbanic music. Fallout 76 is all about nature. It's all about discovery, and it's all about adventure. So this is why in Fallout 76, the orchestral sound is more prominent, but in a, shall we say, twisted way. The solo instruments that are real instruments and not like imaginary, weird kind of like instrument sound are more prominent. And the feel is more of like it's a Fallout in a very much nature-like environment. And the music basically plays this way.
Okay. And I think this is going to be more of a fun question because I know I've spoken with several other composers, and most composers have a specific instrument or set of instruments that they prefer to work with. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, despite the fact that they may not fit it, they try to weave it in. Is there something specifically that you like working with?
I really like solos when it comes, for example, the sound of cello. And you will hear the sound of cello pretty prominent in my scores. And it's not about if it belongs or no. It is like from an emotional point of view, will it work? Because the settings could be always altered and always manipulated, and the music could fit almost anything. However, will it really work to describe the emotional layer, this basically area that we really want to tap into when we are trying to describe what's going on in the game from a story, narrative, and emotional element?
Okay, this one's fun. How close of a relationship do you actually have to have with the developers? How closely do you work with them when it comes to matching your music to specific scenes and specific areas within the game? How involved are you with that, or how involved are the developers with that in telling you what they want?
As close as you could get. I'm working with Todd Howard and Mark Lampert in the last 15 years. We are colleagues, but we are also very good friends. We could go out together, and although they're in DC, every time Todd is in Vegas, for example, for conventions, like, hey, hop over, let's go out, let's do this. And Mark Lampert, who is the legendary Bethesda audio director for many years, we are very close also as friends. And it's important because Fallout is it's sort of like we are all very much invested in this franchise. We live it, we breathe it. It's really something that, Mark and I and Todd, like for the main theme, we could just go so many places, and you gotta have a lot of patience. And I would say that the main theme for these games are almost being composed by the three of us, because I can provide the music, but they're providing all the feedback, and they provide all the ideas and inspiration. And Todd, it might not be a musician, but he knows exactly what he wants. And not only he knows what he wants for the specific hue, he already have the vision how this specific hue is going to be reflected on the rest of the music, because we always start from the main theme. So he really takes it as sort of like a launching point and like a base, I would say almost draft for the rest of the music. And this is the way he looks at it, and Mark also. So we could, you know, during the creation of like the main themes and the most important elements, we could be on the phone almost every day. After that, when we go to sort of like more, you know, all right, so now we're working for the game, it's going to be mainly Mark Lampert and I, you know, almost again every day on email and stuff and talking. And you know, we really like to pick one each other's brain, because it's something that the way he thinks and the way I think is totally different. You know, he's thinking more in terms, for example, of harmonic aesthetics, and I think always more from terms of melodic and sound design aesthetics. So we always sort of like feed each other with ideas, and this is a real creative environment that is basically very unique to the way I'm working on games. Some other projects that I'm doing, I'm pretty much sort of like sending music, get some feedback, sending music. But here, it is more like something that is being hatched by this closed relationships.
Okay. Should we pick one each more?
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, I'll let you go this one because I like that last one.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, actually, I'm gonna go with one that we didn't actually write down here because it came into my head while we've been talking. How far along in the overall design process for a game like any of the Fallout titles do you get involved, and how early on do you have to start thinking about themes and styles and instrumentation?
So this question actually totally connected to the previous question and about relationships, because when I'm being brought, like Fallout 4, for example, was out in 2016. I've been brought to it in 2012. Same with Vegas and same with 76. Usually 4 years before, I'm already being brought to the studio to discuss. Now, it's so interesting because at this stage there's some very preliminary art elements. There is some storyline in place, maybe very primitive levels, but this is pretty much it. So it's almost like an open page and like a like empty page. And then we talk about the story and we talk about what's going to be the main motivation we want to inject to the player. What we really want the music to do? What do we want the music to tell? And how do we want the music to tell the story? Now, this is where the basic ideas are being hatched. Like, for example, on Fallout 4, like after I visited, during the visit in 2012, I said to Todd and Mark, listen, guys, I think that the piano will work best for this franchise because it's kind of like intimate setting. It's a story about a family. I think that, and this is where the whole idea of piano was born in the middle of 2012. All right. Same thing with 76 when we were talking about it. It's like, that got to be very warm, but it all and vast, because it's all like very nature-like. It's not, we're not like urban, but on the other hand, it should still maintain some kind of a darkness, some kind of an ominous atmosphere. So we were thinking about. I remember that when we talked about like all the elements of strings and how we should work with strings in Fallout 76, we listened to scores like "There Will Be Blood," because there are some very eerie strings there and very raw strings that we thought, that's going to be great in this part. And then we listened to some of Johan Johansson's scores, because we thought that some of actually his synthetic and dark elements could, so we really built like, for example, this, like, okay, so that should be a little bit more orchestral, aesthetics, because we're talking more about nature. So these ideas actually are being hatched during like the first visit, when even the artists are not really deep at work. And after I create like the first piece, they could start share it with a team. So they will share it with the artists, and they will start to get like, oh, this sounds like this. Maybe it should, we should draw this and this. And then I could start seeing, their art, elements and their artistic things that they already created. And it's like, oh, that's actually really evoking that and that. So we are growing organically together. Game is being developed. All the components, including the music, are being developed together.
Great, you get the last question.
Yeah, and I thought of a different one while we were sitting here. So this, with Fallout 76 just coming out in a few weeks, and it's their next big flagship, the music that you've composed for this, do you actually have a particular favorite track that maybe while the players are listening, they can look for your favorite track, and why is it your favorite? Was there a specific one?
It's a good question. I think still one of them is the main theme, because it is really sort of like combining all the elements that will be sound later. But specifically, I don't want to say the names because it's a bit too early, but on top of this, there are like 3 more cues that I really, really attached to, and when time will come, we could talk more about them.
Well, I'm going to throw out one bonus question, since we're going to be attending the live concert in basically this time tomorrow, at the time we're recording. When you hear these compositions being performed by an orchestra and in a setting like we're going to hear it tomorrow, what kind of feelings does that evoke? Because it must be very different to when you're sitting in front of a console screen or a computer screen and seeing and hearing the music. Like, how does that change how you feel about what you've created?
It's extremely emotional, because, and again, due to this amazing Bethesda, like being as visionary company as they are, the way they thought to do it, just like to make a concert with the music with almost no connection to the game. That's so, you show some footages, but it's all about the music. It's such an amazing emotional moment for me, because this is the only moment when I could really physically almost connect with the players, with the fans. And it's just an really amazing opportunity for me. I'm sitting in my studio in Encino. I don't talk to anybody except of the people that are developing the game. I have no connection with the audience. And for us musicians, one of the most primitive, preliminary, basic, and it's the most profound thing that we need is this connection with the audience. So Bethesda really created it for me, and I couldn't be more grateful, because it is, it just feels like I could say to the fans, thank you for who you are, thank you for supporting, thank you for, and I'm happy to really see you and connect with you finally in this kind of a setting, and I'm so happy that I could share my music with you.
Well, I think the feeling will be very mutual. If the last concert was anything to go by, I just had a vivid memory just then of when Bethesda put on the concert around, I think it was for the Skyrim remastered edition, and almost all the music in that concert was from throughout the Elder Scrolls series. And then towards the end, the Fallout logo came on screen and the audience went nuts.
I remember I saw it in the video, and then again I was like, oh, I should have been there.
It was fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, and obviously for your work in the games that we enjoy so much. I think that's a fair assessment.
Absolutely, yes. I loved all of the music that I played from the games. I'm one of the, I would say, odd gamers who never turn the music off because it's so connecting to me for the world, so I can listen to it and it brings me into the game that I'm playing.
For us.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much, and looking forward to playing Fallout 76.
Me too.
So that was Inon Zur. That was an awesome interview.
Indeed.
I mean, it's awesome to do. It's up to listeners, of course, if it's awesome to listen to. But I think I thoroughly enjoyed meeting him. I just noticed every answer he gave through a massive smile.
Yes, he did. I know we don't have a video of the interview itself, but the entire time you could just tell from the very beginning that he absolutely adores what he's doing and was more than happy to talk to us about it. And he had some interesting insights that, we were able to get out of him for all the works that he's been doing so far. I'm really looking forward to hearing more tracks from Fallout 76, since that's pretty much what's next in line over at Bethesda. I mean, well, we're recording this as of the 3rd of November. It's exactly 4 p.m. here, and the concert starts at 7 p.m. later today. So we thought, well, we'll do the interview ahead of time, then we'll do Tales in the afternoon here, and then we'll go to the concert, and then we'll record a little bit of a review after the concert's finished, and then edit that back into the show. So assuming Aggelos edits that into the end of the show, that is where you'll find our final thoughts on the concert itself in a little bit. Absolutely.
Well, shall I transition us into a surprise lore reading?
Yes.
Because this is something that I very much erected the spine of surprise as a result of discovering. I found a lore book called The Factotum's Secret Voice, and I was so excited about it. It was one of these things I discovered where I had to text Aggelos immediately and say, have you heard about this? Did you know this? I didn't know this, and I thought I knew everything. Turns out that arrogance was very poorly placed because I didn't know this. The Factotum's Secret Voice. This is written by Elector Tidris Dran, who is a clockwork apostle. And here we go. In fact, you know what? I'm going to preempt this. The reason why this book is so interesting is that I adore the voices of the Factotums in the Clockwork City. I love the tone. I love the timbre. I love the things they say. I love the fact that they say things like dreaming, reflecting. And I love that. It's amazing. But I didn't know anything about these voices. I also didn't know Sothasil had a sister, which he apparently does. And apparently the voice of these Factotums may in fact be drawn from that very sister. And that's what this book explains, and I just thought it was worth pointing that out before diving into the book itself. So here we go. This is the Factotum's Secret Voice. Even in this shrine to knowledge and blasphemous inquiry, some subjects remain taboo. I spent all my long years as a clockwork apostle pushing against those boundaries, desperate to see our order truly live its creed, inquire without limits. In most cases, I endured little more than sighs and grumbles from my superiors, but one topic in particular earns me forceful and genuine condemnation, my exploration of the Factotum's inner voice. The Order's relationship with fabricants and factotums has always been prickly. On one hand, we must understand some critical aspects of these creatures' makeup. Their nature and materials informed the creation of our own enhancements. The synthesis of flesh and engineering remains one of our greatest achievements and most enduring traditions. However, delving too deep into the creature's subroutines and manufacture starts to look less and less like inquiry and more like hubris, lifting Sothasil's skirts, as it were. For my part, I've always been endlessly fascinated by the Factotum's voice and behavior. While the Factotums perform multitudinous different tasks, they remained linked by their appearance, voice, and confusing, some would say troubling, verbal artifacts. When exodromals meet a Factotum for the first time, they often asked, "Whose voice is that?" Truthfully, no one knows, aside from Lord Set, of course. I spent countless days in the Archivox researching Lord Set's past. I even got special dispensation to visit the mnemonic planisphere once. I'm confident that the truth of the Factotum's voice lies somewhere in Lord Set's personal history. Most apostles avoid talking about it, with some notable exceptions. My friend Associate Xenon, for example. If engaged privately, however, apostles will offer one of three major theories. Some believe that it's the voice of Sothasil's mother. Others think it's the voice of a lost lover. Then, still others, myself included, believe it's the voice of Sothasil's sister. The first and most compelling piece of evidence can be found in the elegiac replication, a personal memorial of sorts that Lord Set built in the Radius long ago. One of the memorial plaques refers to a Sotha Gnawl. It states that this Sotha Gnawl possessed a soul that deserved transcendence, implying a life beyond natural limitations. Gnawl's face bears a clear resemblance to that of the Clockwork God, indicating that she was a close family member. Her garb does not appear matronly, and her posture does not conform to any psycho-autistic trends that would indicate motherly affection. Additionally, I've seen more than a few references to the fact that Sothasil was not an only child. Taken together, I think this makes a clear case for Sotha Gnawl as sister. Naturally, this leads to all kinds of uncomfortable questions about what soul's transcendence means in this context. Does some aspect of Gnawl's animus exist inside the brass labourers we find all over the city? I would say no, if not for the verbal artifacts. When faced with a query that requires higher cognition, Factotums often recite a non sequitur in two parts, brief statements that have a loose connection to one another but no discernible connection to the larger conversation. These non sequiturs, known as verbal artifacts, tend to be simple recitations of household scenes. They refer to overturned pots, rain on glass, boots by the fire, and so on. Occasionally they stray into more personal terrain, like the complexion of an old woman's hands or the sound of someone weeping. Then, once in a very great while, they'll say something genuinely troubling statements like burning beds, screaming, or collapsed roof, crushed child. Factotums that say things like that tend to be recalled to the pneumatic forge in short order and taken out of circulation indefinitely. But this, of course, begs the question, where are these verbal artifacts coming from? Are they Sotha Gnaul's memory, or some vital subfunction that enhances empathic responses to the concerns of living residents? Though it pains me to consider it, I believe the evidence points to the former rather than the latter. As everyone knows, the false prince, called Mehrunes Dagon, destroyed Sothasil's ancestral home of Ald Sotha when our lord was still a youth, leaving him as the sole survivor. Scenes of fire and death may well have been Sotha Gnaul's final and most traumatic memories. I hope it's not true. I hope all these various observations are the product of simple coincidence. But as scholars, we must acknowledge the possibility that these machines have a deeper and more troubling history than we realize. As I said before, I take my role as an iconoclast seriously, but in this case, perhaps it's best that we never know the truth.
That was haunting.
I told you, I found it and I read it and I was like, he had a sister. His sister may have been crushed, burnt to death, screaming. These voices from the Factotums are some kind of bizarre, unintentional verbal artifact of a distressed final moments of his sister, preserved in some form. They use the term transcendence, but essentially it's preservation, which makes you think that there's this deep story underneath Sothasil, which is actually that he potentially is quite an emotional person, has strong family values, and wanted to retain some semblance of a connection with his sister, and in doing so, or rather by baking that voice and the characteristics of it into these Factotums, maybe that is his way of doing so. That's my theory.
No, it makes sense, and it's odd because we don't know much about the early life of any of the tribunal. I mean, I almost forgot about Mehrunes Dagon destroying Odd Sotha already, but even then, almost everything else is either propaganda from the tribunal temple, giving histories about how the gods ascended or were born a god, if you ask Sotha or Vivek. But we know that's not the case, especially if we look at it from a meta level. If you played Morrowind 3 and are willing to step outside the box, we already know that they stole divinity from the heart of Lorkhan. But in the time of ESO, we wouldn't know that. But even so, we have the propaganda from the temple. We have what the dissident priests are saying. But there's still not much known about it prior to the ascension of the tribunal versus what they really want to put out there. But Sotha Sil being the most enigmatic of all of them, we don't know much about him at all.
No.
Because even Vivek, whether it's propaganda or not, talks fairly, I don't want to say passionately. Passionately is not the right word.
What about being born from an egg?
Well, being born from an egg, but he does talk about his mother and the story of his inception going forward. And he does kind of project that loving feeling, that reverent feeling towards his mother, despite the fact that she no longer is around. Amalexia, we still don't know a whole bunch of, but she's often known as Mother Morrowind, and we get that sense of wanting to care for her people. It's just Sotha Sil, we don't know much about at all. So when you get the Clockwork City and this particular thing, it's interesting to dig into.
It absolutely is. And when you hear some of these verbal artifacts in person, after reading this book, it just adds this whole new depth that I didn't know even existed, and I'm deeply, deeply hopeful that we can explore it in more detail. And I actually think I'm going to use this as a jumping off point. I'm going to do a little bit of extra research and see what else I can pull together and find about Sotha Sil's family, about his sister, and maybe that's something to discuss over in a coming episode. But that's going to be my little mini project, is to get to the bottom of this voice and this family arrangement
that'd be amazing.
Intrigued us so much.
Indeed. Well, we hope you enjoyed that. So we're going to go ahead and move on into our next section, which we're going to talk about what we've been doing in the Elder Scrolls this week. And I know one of the things, being here in London with Nate, we actually got to play together for the first time.
Yeah, first time. I'm actually surprised that it's the first time we've ever played the game together. I mean, obviously it's the first time we played it in person, but I thought at some point maybe did we play together on a PTS back in the day, but I actually don't think we did. I think that was just an idea I had. It never actually manifested itself into an act of gaming.
Yeah, I was questioning that myself, because I knew I had a video at one time. This was way back before even One Tamriel. I think it was City of Ash 2 was just coming out. And I remember doing the PTS with a couple people, and I know Aloha was there, so she also plays on the EU side. I could have swore it was you as well, but now that I questioned you about it, it's like maybe it really wasn't you, and now I don't know who it was that we actually played with.
Yeah, just some other Argonian obsessed Brit.
Probably. Well, see, that's the thing. That's maybe that's what threw me off. Because both Aloha and I had to roll characters. We both made Argonians, and she was my egg sister, and I think my Argonian's name was Stands in Red Circle.
Nice. I imagine Thais would have loved that as well, because she's my other Argonian loving friend. She's a big fan of the scales. Yeah.
And we may or may not have a special treat for some people here in the future. I'm going to make a little bit of an announcement.
Tease.
Yeah, it's a tease. It's a tease.
It's a tease for me too, because it hasn't actually happened yet, but we were Skyping her from my house, weren't we, the other evening, and thought, this is an idea. We could do this.
Yeah, we're going to get Nate and...
Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
There will be something coming in the future. Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, but I mean, it's been a lot of fun. So I mean, we were talking ahead of the show whether we were going to do Tales in the normal way, because our Tales of Tamriel this week are essentially everything Ag and I have done in person. One of the things that was very exciting for me is that because I, like Aggelos, do not like racing through dungeons on our first runs. You know, we like to absorb the lore, the characters, the books, the letters, the diaries, every backpack. You know, we're not there to just loot goods. We're there to loot knowledge and lore. And so there are quite a few dungeons in the game, even dating back to like the first year of its life, that I hadn't done. You know, I still haven't done like Banish Cells 2, which I think is an old one.
Yeah, that was was it one of the originals? I'm trying to think, because they started adding the 2s in later, because remember, no, it wasn't when they eventually went back and added 1s and 2s for everything, and a vet and normal for everything. But originally, the 2s, I believe, were the vet versions.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because, I mean, when City of Ash 2 was released, that was quite a little while after the original City of Ash. And that's a great example of one that we actually managed to play today, because City of Ash is one that was sitting in my uncompleted pile. And I couldn't even remember really any of the original story whatsoever. It came flooding back to me by the end, but I'd really forgotten. So we got to play through, but we realized a bit of an issue that we have with the way that Elder Scrolls Online is set up, in that, yes, you can log into the North American mega server and you can log into the European mega server, but you can't transfer your characters between the two. And we knew that, but it wasn't until we decided to sit down and spend several hours, you know, going through dungeons together, that there's only one way of doing that. Either I roll a very basic character on the NA server, which wouldn't have really helped, or Aggelos rolls a baby character on EU, which again wouldn't really have helped us get through these dungeons, just two people. So what we actually did, which I think was a stroke of genius, if you don't mind me saying, was my brother, who plays another EP Dragon Knight called Caracas on the EU mega server. He hadn't fully maxed out his champion points, and he's not a massive fan of the dungeons anyway. So I said, well, what if Aggelos logs in as Caracas? Because then you've got a strong DK that we can take through these dungeons. We can experience the lore and stuff together, but also you get some skill points and champion points and loot and all that kind of stuff. And he was very happy for that. So he's got we spent 2 hours or something this morning, probably just completely respecking his character. He hasn't even got it back yet. But we ran through City of Ash was one of the few we did, City of Ash 1 and 2. And it was just great to play those back to back. I really enjoyed it.
It was, and it was fascinating, because we were talking a little bit, and I said about how his character was, and you were saying he was having issues with survivability. And I think this is good specifically for new listeners as well, who may not understand one versus the other. When I looked through his original character, he was a stamina DK, not a tank, but I think he was wearing heavy armor, and he had like 37,000 health or something like that. It was like really high health for a DPS character. And part of the issue when you run like that, the extra health, while yeah, it is extra hit points, if you're not doing enough damage from a DPS side of things, you're still getting ripped apart by the monsters that are fighting, and you're not spec'd as a tank, so you don't have all the mitigation, so you kind of are half in each world, and that kind of gives you, no matter how high your health is, you still feel very, very squishy. So since he wanted to play a DPS type character, we stripped out all the extra points he had in health. I think I put a few in health just to get him over a certain threshold that I wanted to see him at, and dumped the rest in the stamina. We went through his gear, changed out all of his gear into more of a medium base play, because
which I crafted with my own fair hands.
Yes,
Hunding's Rage. I think we went 5-piece Hundings, 4-piece Night Mother's Gaze, and 3-piece
Agility.
Yeah.
And that's a nice beginner set for a stamina DPS, because it's enough to get you going, and I noticed a marked increase in the damage, as well as overall survivability, because even though I had so much health, nothing was dying originally. And because nothing was dying originally, then I would eventually just get whittled down to nothing. So
and it's an interesting shift, isn't it? It's that it's less about having enough health to take all the damage. It's about being able to clear the mobs fast enough that they don't hit you in the first place,
right?
Or don't hit you enough, too much.
Yeah, and if a monster has so much health that you can't kill it quickly anyway, it's meant to be taken on by a group of players. You know, you're not going to be able to take out a world boss right away, especially with such a low CP setup, but those things are meant to be done by a group. So if your damage is high enough for normal mobs, even some veteran mobs, you'll be able to actually take them out fairly well. And I noticed my health pretty much stayed up almost the entire time, minus when we get into the dungeon, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, that was a different type of dungeon, though. That was a lot harder.
It was.
An awful lot harder. The other thing that I found really interesting about that experience was the way that my brother has played the game. You know, he's played pretty much since I started playing. Obviously, I'm borderline obsessed, play every day. But whereas Andy is a much more of an ad hoc casual player. You know, he'll play with me sometimes. We'll do a bit of PvP, but he's not grinding dungeons to get gear drops. He's not playing the RNG lottery on crown crates and on everything else. He's not leveling up his crafting in order to craft his own. He just wants to go in, kill some mobs, listen to some cool stories, and have some fun. So by doing that over the last 3 or 4 years, he's built up a character that has progressively just added stuff to it. You know, when he started, there were no champion points. When he started, there were no new sets like we have now. There's all of this stuff that's happened, but sometimes I think for some casual players, and this is what I've learned from doing this today and yesterday, is it can really be worth just going back, resetting everything, clearing out your inventory almost, and just starting fresh and thinking, right, what do I want to be? What do I want to do? What am I enjoying doing? And just piece by piece, skill by skill, champion point by champion point, just reconstructing your character from the ground up. Because we did that with Carakas, and we were running dungeons just the two of us and completing them basically without dying a single time. And that was just 2 DPS, no healer, no tank, until we got into the more recent dungeons with the Wolf Hunter expansion. But even then, we did it with 3 and no healer, and it was still great. And he's only on like 300 champion points, so it can really make a huge difference.
He was actually like 289 when we started, and ended at like 305. 302, something like that.
And I think you had an experience scroll on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Well.
Definitely, because I think he also was enlightened as well. So I'm like, I'm maximizing this while we're running these dungeons.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. What was really weird actually was it was weird how you were sitting in my office playing on my gaming PC. I was sitting on a different computer in the other room, and we were sort of shouting between the rooms, talking to each other about, you know, mechanics of the bosses and who's pulling which enemy and all this kind of stuff. And it was as if, from my experience, it was as if I had Tales of Tamriel playing in my office out of the speakers, which I often do, and was sitting in the other room playing the game, which I often do, except this time I could reply. And that was a very surreal experience.
For me, it was kind of send me back in time to the old school LAN parties when everyone would bring their stuff to your house, and then we'd all play together. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I know we did City of Ash 1 and 2 because we had to get Andy's account up because he had never done it before.
No, so we couldn't jump in and do 2 even though I'd done 1 already. We had to do them both. But it was fine because it reminded me a lot of what it was all about.
Right.
It was quite nice playing them back to back.
Well, and because the 1 and 2 are a cohesive story, one right after the other. So given how long it had been since you've done 1, you were even saying by the end, and I know I was reminding you of what was going on because they lead right into the other. If you do two without doing one, or don't remember one, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense of who the characters are, what is going on, and why you are in a giant burning deadlands.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to talk about Wolf Hunter?
we do. Yeah.
You were so excited. I had to gift Andy's account the Wolf Hunter DLC because he doesn't have ESO Plus, whereas I do. And this was one you really wanted to do. You'd never done before. I'd never done before. It went well. It was a very exciting indoor-outdoor sort of experience. What is it called, actually, the name?
A Moonhunter Keep.
That's the one.
Yeah. And I don't know how in creation we survive without ESO Plus. I really don't, because Andy does not have it, so I'm picking stuff up, and all the crafting materials are just sitting in my bag.
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, that's why you got so many crafting materials at the end. Sorry, Andy, you don't get them, but
No,
he doesn't
want
craft
them.
anyway. But they're all just sitting in my bag. I had to be very selective while looting, because it's like, you pick something up, it's like, do I really want those worms?
Do you need more guts?
Well, for me, yeah, because I like fishing, but that having to hold it in your bag, that was such a pain.
It's even more annoying when you think that, a stack of worms takes up the same space as a greatsword.
True.
That's one thing that in all games, actually, I always find a little bit frustrating, is that something that's very tiny, lightweight, fits in a pocket can take up the same amount of space as something that can remove somebody's face.
Well, I mean, there's really only two ways of doing it in most modern MMOs. I mean, if you went into an older MMO, we're kind of getting a tangent here, but it's funny to watch, because the game I remember the most, Ultima Online, didn't have slots. You had a backpack, and every single item you had weight to it. So it didn't care if you were holding 100,000 plants or one sword. It gave a weight and said, okay, you can only carry so much weight.
Which makes more sense. I mean, that's what I had to get used to when we were playing Oblivion.
Oh yeah, Oblivion did that too.
Oblivion had weight. I'm pretty sure Skyrim had weight as well. It's just not the case with Elder Scrolls Online. And in many ways, I do sort of prefer it. It's just a bit annoying, when you have to experience a character that doesn't have the crafting bag, and you're like, I really want to pick up this sword, but unfortunately that space is being occupied by some wheat. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do?
Right. Which one will be more useful? You got to throw one out or leave it on the ground.
Yeah.
So, I guess leaving it on the ground is the same as throwing it out, because it's not going to matter. So Moonhunter Keep. I was excited for this one because I've done March of Sacrifice on my account, but that was the one that I did not do. I was really excited to actually do it. I tried to solo it before, and unfortunately, on my Templar, he's very survivable. He has a lot of damage, and depending on what gear set he has, almost infinite stamina. So I tried to do it, and I failed because the first boss has a mechanic. And actually, as I was thinking about it, almost every single one of those bosses had some sort of mechanic that required someone else to attack or do something along those lines. Because, the first boss is the jailer, and he literally tries to knock you over and, chop your head off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because you have to jump in and interrupt him. Mm-hmm. And he'll do that maybe 3 times over the course of that last bit, doesn't he? He did it more than once, I think.
But so does what's her name? The Moon Priest or something like that? Whatever her name was, the big werewolf. Mm-hmm. She did the knockdown as well that you also had to interrupt. Except for that one time we were doing it. We actually got Arkhaniir on, and he helped us out with that dungeon, because when we started going through it, there were a few points where we're like, yeah, we need at least one more person, because I was playing on Andy's character, which is at that point under 300 or just over 300 CP, and you can definitely feel the difference between under 300 and where my character is at over 1,000. There's a big power difference.
Is this your Sexplar?
Yes, that's the Sexplar.
I mean, I remember when Ark joined, he was really disappointed that you didn't have it. Do you remember? Because he was like, I really, really want to play with the Sexplar, and he was very complimentary about it. I mean, it's a shame he's not here to compliment it, but he really, really I don't know. I think he's really changed his mind. I think he's really come round to adoring that Sexplar now.
I definitely agree, and I know he's asked me several questions already about how he can go about building one himself. So, we'll have to get him one set up so that he can enjoy the pleasure that is the Sexplar, and give up on that Dragon Knight, which is just terrible.
Yeah,
terrible.
And I think pointing that out is in good balance, because if you remember, when we were getting Ark to join, he was actually streaming Skyrim to about 60 people on his Twitch stream, and he jumped over and it was great. But he gave you a bit of a hard time for dying, and it was very interesting for me to sit there and hear that, and to sit here and be involved in this discussion too, knowing exactly what you were thinking at that time and what he's probably thinking now. So. Good
Indeed.
fun, this game, sometimes.
It really is. It really is. I actually, as I'm sitting here thinking, almost every single boss had some sort of mechanic that required an interrupt to save a life. Because even the Archmage would put you in the Archivist would put you in the bubble that had to be broken.
Yeah, and you have to kill those the werewolves as soon as possible before they turn into the berserker type werewolves, and that roar can kill you if you're not careful. You can be one-shotted with that.
When we were doing the Archivist fight, at one point, Ark missed one of the werewolf berserkers, and it started to roar. And I'm like, darn. It has this giant staircase, like one of those ballroom staircases that come down on both sides and kind of lead towards the center of a hallway. I start running up the stairs, and the werewolf is following me around. I made it all the way around and actually didn't die, but I actually had to kite the werewolf up the stairs and down the other side to avoid that roar, because that roar from those, what are they, the hulking werewolves, just rip you apart.
Yeah, they're beastly, literally and figuratively. And I mean, actually, there was, I can't remember if it was that boss or the one after, but the penultimate boss in that dungeon is harder than the final boss by a large margin.
Yeah, no, I think you're referring to the it's the Moonkeeper or something. I can't remember if that's her full name, but it's I guess the second in command to Vykosa, the main boss of Moonhunter.
Who brings out all the chained wolves and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, that fight was so much easier than the one before it. Like, we wiped a couple of times in the fight before that. Again, because we didn't have a healer, we didn't know the mechanics as well.
Yeah.
But on that last one, we did it just straight away and didn't really struggle.
No, yeah, but the one right before it, she has that ability, like I said, that can knock you down, and then she just tears you apart. At one point, we wiped because it's not just a single target. It knocked all three of us on our backs, and we all got killed from the ability because no one was still up to interrupt. So it was, the mechanics of that fight were very fascinating, and it was fun to listen to Ark stream it at the same time, because he was mentioning he played it already on Veteran. This was just normal so we could get the story. And the Veteran apparently is even more brutal, which I completely believe from these DLC dungeons. They are meant to be considerably harder. And you could see we were duoing the, even on my Lobi character and whatnot, we were duoing the older dungeons, having no problem whatsoever, even to the point where like, well, we could probably have put this on Vet and still been okay.
And there was one time where I was reading a book and I hadn't realized that you'd gone ahead, and I thought, I'm coming. It's fine, I've got it, it's done. Like, just take on a whole mob single-handedly with a CP 300 tune. Like, why not?
Then we go into Wolf Hunter, and I think one of the first times one of us died, or both, I don't remember if we both wiped, was just during a first trash pool because we didn't take it as seriously as we should. Ran in, these are just normal mobs. All of a sudden you have 6 of them on you. Yeah. And they just rip through you. Even on normal, they're not totally easy.
Yeah, I extended the claw of surprise at that first fight. Yeah, but it was overall it was a good dungeon, and just again doing it in person, doing it with somebody in the flesh, as they say, was just a lot of fun.
Now, you made an interesting comment to me about it, that while the atmosphere of the dungeon was amazing, which it really was, you're exploring through the Silver Dawn Keep, the Moonhunter Keep, which is owned by a knightly order called the Silver Dawn, which I'm sure you probably heard of in Skyrim too, because they still exist. In fact, it's in Falkreath. If you've been playing Skyrim, you actually get to interact with the Silver Dawn during the Companion's Quest, because you get turned into a werewolf, you get put in prison. It's the Silver Dawn who actually imprisons you. So it's not the first time we've heard of these guys, which is why I liked it, but you weren't real thrilled with the story overall.
I don't know what it was about it. I mean, it could have just been because I was so focused on learning the mechanics, and even though I was reading the books and listening to the characters, I was really thinking about the fights, but I didn't find myself massively engaged with the story in a way that I would have liked to, or that we did in City of Ash 2. You know, when we were going through City of Ash 2, you know, we were commenting about, you know, this guy's wife who'd gone through, and here she is, and all this kind of stuff. Whereas in the Wolf Hunter one, I don't know. Maybe if I played it again, I would enjoy it more. But what I really enjoyed was the actual design of the dungeon itself. I thought the mechanics of the boss fights were very interesting. I really like how you're inside at some points, you're outside at some points. There was one boss that you fight where you have to take out these Spriggans that heal the boss, and that was that's always a fun mechanic because you have to pay attention to that, really.
One of the things is it's part of a garden maze as well. So when the Spriggans spawn, they can actually spawn in the maze, and you have to try to find them. Like, because they're not just in a circle where they appear on the outside. Like one of the bosses in I can't remember it. I can't remember the dungeon now, or what the last one was. The last DLC dungeon pack.
Horns of the Reach? No. Yeah, I know which one you're thinking of.
Yeah, but there's one where they have the stranglers that appear around a circle around you, and you just have to kill them.
I haven't done it. So
yeah, well, they're right there. They're right in a dead circle. Well, these ones form in a circle too, but because there are these hedges, they can actually hide behind the hedges, so you're looking and you just see a little beam of light coming from behind a hedge that you have to run around and get. I thought that was a neat little mix. From a character's perspective, I think I know why you feel like City of Ash 2. There was a little bit more of a personal feel as you're running through. The characters are assisting other members of the Undaunted who ran through and failed.
Yeah.
They have a little bit of a history, whereas there's only 2 characters in the entire thing.
I think that's it exactly. Plus, I'm always a bit of a hopeless romantic when it comes to, you know, husband and wife, boy meets girl type stories. You know, anything where there's some kind of a relationship under pressure, I love those sorts of stories, and I love seeing them work out as well. You know, that's always good.
Because maybe that's why you didn't like it, because there was a little bit of a relationship story. Didn't you notice the naughty female Khajiit? She kept talking about the handsome knight.
Oh yeah, because he could have killed. Was it Nazdra or something like that? I think. Yeah. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too harsh. I just don't remember thinking, that's one I would love to do again. But undoubtedly will do at some point.
Oh, I definitely will, because I loved it for the whole thing. But yeah, the cat actually keeps referring to what was one of my favorite lines she did. She talked about the knight. He's like, he's not looking so good. Well, he always looks good, but
yes. Oh, okay, yeah, I do remember that actually. Yeah, okay, that was quite good.
Yeah, she was a little minx. That's what she was. So.
Yeah,
but I liked the story of it, and I thought the overall design was really, really great. Otherwise, I think I was messing around in Murkmire a little bit, but not a whole lot. I've been reading a few books. I logged on this morning before Nate was able to wake up. And I managed to mess around in Murkmire and Lilmoth area, and it's pretty cool. And I like that that they took the time to make the different Argonians look different based on the different tribes. I saw one of the Deadwater tribe, and they have a very unique look. The Nagakuras.
The neck, the colorful. Is that the neck?
It's the one who does the death the death games or whatever it is, the hunts.
No, that's not him.
Boku or something like that.
Boku, yeah. No,
But
I'm thinking of the other guy.
You're thinking of the Bright Throats.
The Bright Throats, yes.
Yeah. I haven't seen one of those yet, but there is one from the Deadwater tribe or the Nagakure, which has this weird, almost like, I want to say frog-like head rather than lizard. But he's kind of neat. And I made note, and this is something I want to say even before the show launched and I didn't get to. Do you realize that the next chapter will probably be announced in the next month or two? Because I was out looking at your Elder Scrolls shelf, and I'm like, he's going to need a bigger shelf when they release the next chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I need a bigger shelf now, but this is my Elder Scrolls shelf on which all of my Elder Scrolls stuff lives, all my swag and books and, boxes and things. Yeah, and it's funny because if they did something in, say, elsewhere, because of the way the Khajiit are, that their appearances are determined, is where under the two moons they're born. That would open up a whole new range of opportunities for them to explore the different sort of subcategories of Khajiit, which, as massive cat fans, I'm a fan of.
Yes. No, I'm just seeing that they're willing to make the changes. Like before we knew about the main, I think we even see the main, but I wasn't overly impressed with him because he's still using the older Khajiit model. But with the new... Well, the same thing happened when we saw Almalexia. She was more or less just a Dunmer model that they added a glow to, but they really upped their game when it came to Morrowind, when we saw Vivek, and Clockwork City, when we saw Sotha Sil. I was really worried that it was going to be something just, that they were going to take the cheap way out, but they didn't. They actually did a good job with those two of the Tribunal versus Almalexia. I'd like to actually see Almalexia get remade, but, I don't know if they can justify that cost-wise because it's not really going to add to anything other than the immersion's sake. But knowing that they changed the models for the Argonians based on the tribe, it will be neat to see if they change the Khajiit based on the moon cycle in which they were born under.
I would be a big fan of that. I mean, speaking of Murkmire, I unlocked a lot of achievements over the last couple of weeks in particular because I've been really playing a lot of ESO again recently. I took not a break as such, but I took a step back from a kind of being an obsessive player, and I'm absolutely loving being back full time playing the game and in PvP as well. So I've unlocked a bunch of achievements that I'm pretty proud of. I did both of the world bosses in Murkmire because I've really jumped straight to Murkmire, which is a lot of fun. But on the bigger levels, I finally did quite a few of the trials, because my PvP guild decided that now would be a fun time to start doing more trials when PvP isn't particularly well populated. So I've done Aetherian Archive, I've done Sanctum of Phidia, I've done, what else did I do? What are some of the other ones in Craglorn?
Helra?
Helra Citadel, did that as well. Did a whole bunch. We haven't done Halls of Fabrication yet, which I'm looking forward to. And there is one in the Clockwork City that we did do.
It's the Asylum Sanctorum.
That's the one. Yep, we did that one. In fact, I did that one twice. And I really love those. I mean, I was very apprehensive about doing trials for the same reasons that I'm not a massive dungeon player, because I often don't have the right people to play that. And often when you're picking up a pug for trials, if you go in and say, I don't know what I'm doing, and you've got a group that's trying to, go through it quite quickly, it's a waste of time. I'm going to miss the story, and I'm going to hold the team, the group back from completing it. And there are some you really need to know. And the one example of this that I think we did finally manage to nail was in Somerset, and we did the what's the trial? The big trial in Somerset called
Cloudrest.
Cloudrest. We did. Is that a trial or is it arena? It's a trial, isn't it?
It's a trial.
It's 12-man trial. We did that, and we were led by a tank who really knew the mechanics, really knew it very well, had done it several times already. But most of us hadn't done it before, and most of us are decent players enough that we can take instruction, and we can learn. But the final boss, you're fighting a giant sea slode, which is a lot of fun because a sea slode are awful. they should just be blown off the face of Nern, but there we go. It's a story for another day. And you're fighting this thing, and you have to have a couple of people go down underneath the main place where you're fighting to do a few mechanics that allow the people above to not wipe, because if they fail down below, the whole group wipes. It's not even, you don't even wipe, the game just ends. You have to restart the whole thing. And we probably wiped 7-8 times and spent about 90 minutes, over an hour certainly, just on that final boss, until we managed to get 2 or 3 people who knew what they were doing downstairs and beating it. And we finally did beat it. And when we did beat it, that feeling of achievement really feels good. Like, more so than any dungeon, than any quest. Like, those trials, as someone who's not done a lot of trials, if you can get in there with a group that's learning with you, and you manage to learn these mechanics from a veteran player who's in the group with you, when you finally do beat those trials, man, that is a feeling. That moistened my scales, I'll be honest. I really did. So yeah, that was a few highlights that jump out.
Awesome. Yeah, no, something with trials is like, that is really the sense of you've accomplished something that isn't a solo thing. And that's actually one of the things that, from an MMORPG perspective, is so cool, is being able to actually push forward with a group of players and accomplish something you couldn't do on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I just wish there was an easier way for players who aren't necessarily new to the game, who don't stand in red circles, and know enough about a build to put together the right kind of build for those sorts of fights, but who don't necessarily know the mechanics of the bosses that are essential to beating them. There's no really, I don't think right now, there's no really easy way of getting those groups together where everybody's on the same page. And that's something that, maybe some guilds sort out themselves. But for me, it's been 4 years until I've actually done my first trial.
One thing that World of Warcraft did recently, and they did it in lore, they called it a dungeon journal, where essentially whenever they release a new raid or dungeon, it gives you a little book that you can read that gives the name of the boss, a little bit of a lore about the boss, and it describes their mechanics, what that they do. Not so much as telling you that in this phase, but it gives you the abilities that they have in their arsenal and what those abilities do. So, like, in terms of Cloud Rest, it would be, Zamaja summons a portal to the Shadow Realm, where players have to go under and complete a certain objective, however you want to word it. But being able to read that beforehand may give people a little bit more of a safety net, a feeling like they can prepare before hopping in and not being reliant on hoping other players will tell them what it is that they have to do. So, yeah. All right.
Great.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and move on. Did you have anything else from Tales' side before we move on to the next thing?
No, not really. I think other than just being intrigued by the changes in Cyrodiil, destructible bridges, new outposts, I found that was quite a refreshing experience, let's say. But no, I think that's about it. I mean, everything's just dwarfed by the fact that we got to play together in person.
Yes.
And we got to stand outside an old 7th century building in London together and talk about the theories. Well, my theory on how Elder Scrolls 6 won't take place on Tamriel. Yeah. As far as tales go, walking around medieval London and discussing out their theories about the game was a tale that I'm very glad to have been able to tell.
Yes, indeed. And I think there were quite a few times where we remarked on buildings and tried to compare them to buildings within the Elder Scrolls series.
Oh, yeah, particularly the White Gold Tower. I took Aggelos to what's called Monument, which is a very, very tall monument in London. It's very tall, it's very thin, it's round, and it dates back to a little after the Great Fire of London. And I said, this is called Monument to everyone, but I call it the White Gold Tower, because that's basically what it looks like.
I think when we went to a place, I think it was called Guildhall, where I looked at it and I said, this looks an awful lot like the the Temple of the Ancestor Moth in Cyrodiil, and I actually pulled it up on my phone saying, here's the Temple of the Ancestor Moth in Cyrodiil. And if you look at this, other than missing a tower, the actual general shape reminds me exactly like that particular building, that particular temple. I know we had a little bit of a lore discussion. I said, if you haven't, you really should go out there. There's not really a lot of quests that lead you there. It's just a point of interest. But if you actually sit down and talk to the NPCs are there, they start complaining that all the Elder Scrolls were stolen. You can find a letter in the command tent from one of the priest of the Ancestor Moth saying, hey, you really should return the scrolls to us. We're the only ones who can actually do this stuff. And it was neat to see. Definitely very neat to see. All right, we're going to move right on into the news first, and there's only two things really that are here. We have the new November 2018 Crown Store Showcase. Some of the things that are really important to note from this is, I think, the first month where we're going to start getting... Remember when they redid the Elder Scrolls ESO Plus, where we're now going to start getting free items?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the first items is on the 13th of November, which we get a Molag Bal statuette.
For our houses?
For our houses, yes.
Oh, good. Who doesn't want to have a giant virgin raping Daedric prince standing on their front porch? For those of you who don't know, I'm not being dramatic. That's basically how vampires came. I'm not trying to be bad. Molag Bal raped a virgin, and that is how vampires came into being. So I wasn't being flippant or crass. That's just law.
No, and it's actually one of the reasons why I like the Elder Scrolls so much is because the lore is so dark. You can get into some very disturbing things. I know you and I had spoke a little bit about the lore, and I think we even made comment about Hrothgar and how when they made the shift from teen to mature, or when the ESRB said, now you're mature rated. So they kind of embraced that. Like, they built the entire game around hoping it would get a teen rating. And when the ESRB said, nope, you're screwed, you're a mature rated game, or Peggy is what, like 18 or something?
We do have 18, yeah. It's Peggy, the 16 or 18.
Yeah. ESRB is the US, and I know Peggy's pretty much everywhere else.
Yeah.
But you can see where they finally embraced it, especially when they started with Hrothgar, where they're like, fine, we're not going to build the game for teen anymore. Because if you play through the original gold content, it's all sort of, I guess, pulled back a little bit. When you get to Hrothgar, and later, especially Dark Brotherhood and going forward, they don't pull the punches anymore. They're like, well, fine, we'll embrace it. If we can't get teen, we'll embrace the mature rating, which I think definitely fits. But I think I would use it to scare away Thalmor witnesses.
Yeah, I'd just use it to scare away any, high elves. Like, don't come knocking on my door because this is here. Go away.
Well, make sure that when you do this, you do sign in to try to get it quickly, because these exclusive offers are only available for a limited time. Again, it's free. You just have to go in and claim it, but it's only available on all the different platforms from November 13th to December 6th. So make sure you do that.
So that's actually going to tie in with the next holiday event, isn't it? The one in the Clockwork City?
Yes.
I think that's about the same time.
Clockwork City is either the 13th or the 15th. I can't quite remember either. But yes, you are correct. It will tie in around that time frame. So that's there. There also is going to be some new exclusive offers, including an Ebon Steel Dwemer Spider, which is pretty much the Dwemer Spider we had before, just with a new recoloring.
Yeah, it's red now instead of blue. I'm very disappointed by that. I actually bought one of those and I love it, but to just use exactly the same model, I'm a little bit disappointed with it. It's free, but, Well,
actually, I don't know if this one's... It just has an exclusive ESO Plus deal, so I don't know if this one's free or not, or if it's just an offer that you can only buy if you're ESO Plus.
I'm even less excited about it then.
Yeah, because the first one was free, because I know they mentioned that it'll be free to ESO Plus members for the statuette, but the Ebon Steel Dwemer Spider, which it's... The other Dwemer Spider is bronze, and you can see it. This is more of a gray steel color, and... Yeah, this is actually an exclusive ESO Plus deal, meaning that it still has to be bought with crowns it's just only going to be available to ESO Plus members at a discount for a limited time. See, now, I don't know if that means the discount only applies if you're ESO Plus, or you can only buy it with a discount if you're ESO Plus. I'd be curious about that, but regardless, it's a limited time thing from November 13th to the 19th. And
I'm not going to be buying it, which is, I'm sure, where you were going to be leading with that. But you did show me something I am going to buy, which is that new house in Merkmire.
Oh,
the one where you go downstairs and you're basically underwater.
Arkhaniir's toilet, as I named it.
It is. I will be buying that within minutes of that being out, because it's Argonian, which means it's great by default, but it's also the closest you can get to actually swimming underwater in Elder Scrolls Online. You can't do that in this game because you can't, whereas you can in Skyrim, and it's the one thing that's missing. So I'm pleased that's coming, but that's the story for another day, boys and girls.
Yes. Now, I had to show Nate this particular Zanmar and where Ark took his nosedive in Tamriel's toilet. So, but of course, Nate, being the Argonian that he is, pretty much jumped on that right away.
I have to clarify something. It's not that I want to be an Argonian. It's that I love the Argonians. You know, my character is a Bosmer. I love the Bosmer. They are fantastic creatures. I don't know, but I want an Argonian. I basically want an Argonian pet. You know, I want an Argonian pet, or I want my neighbor to be Argonian. You know, so I can potter around my garden and hear them talking about, you know, how moist the ground is, or how the sun is, you know, reflecting off their scales in a, you know, a very beautiful way. That's what I want to overhear in my day. But I don't want to be a reptilian creature. I just want that to be out in public, on record.
I think you missed your racial line. I don't think Bosmer's the race for you. I think it's more Dunmer, because they have Argonian pets.
But I don't want to be a dark elf.
I was making a slaver joke, but yeah, okay.
I know. Whereas I had to consider all of these things. I'm very, very careful about this. Very, very careful, because if there's one thing you have to do when you love the law is obey the law. And, you know, there you go.
The next thing we have on the docket, of course, is the Nibonese Noble Pack, and that'll be available in the Crown Store in November. It's exclusive ESO Plus deal, but then later to all players in January. So this makes me think that we'll get a deal for a smaller Crown price, because it'll be available from November 29th to December 3rd, and we'll be able to get it as ESO Plus members at a discount, and then it'll later go away and then come back at full price for everyone else. Now, that does make me think that the mount before will only be available to ESO Plus members because of the wording that they use.
I could believe that. Yeah, I could believe that.
We're also getting a 30% discount on all Hollowjack Crown crates, so you can get a 15 crate bundle for their Black Friday or Black Fridays sale, which I always kind of like. And that will also be available to ESO Plus. These are the things that they've been trying to do to make ESO Plus more attractive. You'll be able to get items at a cheaper discount and are free to encourage people to pick up ESO Plus if the craft bag wasn't enough of a reason, as well as the double bank space.
And free access to all the DLC. Let me just throw that out there. That's the reason I subscribe.
Well, yeah, that's pretty nice as well. So we're also getting a new pack, which I think is actually out as of right now, which is the Flat Brim Morning Hat pack, which you got a little bit of a Van Helsing appeal to it, and the Skull Face Tattoo. This is for the Day of the Dead type event. It's not really an event, it's just more of a hey, here you go. We also have the Orc Wise Woman's Vestments coming out on the November 8th through the 12th. So if you care for orcs, I don't know who you are, but the one of you that are out there, you can check out that as well. And we'll have a link in the description of the show to let you see all these and all the pictures and all the glorious fun stuff. And the last two items that we'll really talk about for the most part is they are adding another one of the Troll King's arms pack. So you know they've been doing those recently, like they did the Shadow Rend, they did Moleg Kenna.
Oh yeah.
And they did Grondar, I think that's his name, Grondar, the skin golem.
And I'm glad they did, because they sell for a lot of gold if you don't want to use them.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
oh yeah, you can sell those for well over 100,000 gold each.
I didn't know they were being sold, but now I'm going to have to look and maybe pick one of those up because I would love to see that outfit style. So yeah, I like the Troll King. I'd probably do the Troll King. I didn't do Grondor. I did buy the Shadow Rend and I did buy Molag Kenna, but I did not buy Grondor. I don't like him. They look stupid for my character. I'm not going to be walking around with a shield with human skin draped over it. That's just not the type of player that I have.
No fun.
No, I know. But Troll King, however, is something I may end up doing. And we have more furniture packs coming, which I'm just going to highlight over, which you can see themselves. They have the New Life Festival, the Clockwork Gods Domain, Deepmire Expedition, which again, you'll have to look at these to see. But one of the coolest ones they have is they're adding a new house, which is one I wanted to talk about. The Enchanted Snow Globe home is now available in the Crown Store from November 29th to January 2nd. So this is a Crown Store exclusive mount where if you
house,
yes.
I mean, you probably could mount the house, but it wouldn't go very fast.
No, it wouldn't. And I was looking at mounts earlier, so that's probably why. It's exactly where the New Life Festival takes place with the Enchanted Mead. It's sitting on a table, but you can actually go in-game and look at it right now. You literally get sucked into the snow globe, similar to how we did that in Clockwork City. You click the little button and you're good to go. And you get to go inside and be inside this little house. It's pretty neat. I like it, and depending on the cost, I may pick it up.
Yeah. It's a bit novelty for me, but I do like the aesthetic. It's a neat idea.
Well, it's a
I just don't like snow globes.
It's a Nibonese house, though. When you get in there, it actually looks like the lighthouse that you the very first quest in Dark Brotherhood, where you go to the lighthouse. It's that exact same building.
There is another quest that I only recently discovered in Skyrim, actually, that takes place in a lighthouse. I think I may have mentioned this on a Tales one before, but yeah, lighthouses I'm in favor of. Right. Snow globes, not so much. They just remind me of tourists.
Which is fitting for me this week, so hey, whatever. The last two things, obviously one of them by the time this episode comes out is already gone, but it is the Badger Bear. Seems fitting because of Argonians. This was available from the 1st of November to the 5th of November for a very limited time. Honestly, I think, well, with us being away, I didn't keep up on the news, so I'm sure this came out right before it, but there's only like 2 days left on this one. And we have one from November 8th to the 12th, which is the pale-plumed fledgling griffin pet. It's cute, and I want it.
Aww.
All right, we're going to have to stop the show here because we have to get ready for the Bethesda Game Studio concert. So the next voices you are going to hear will be Nate and I discussing our thoughts of that particular event. So we will see you then. All right, we are here right after the Bethesda Game Studios concert where I was with Nate, aka Misa, and we got a chance to listen to a bunch of the new music coming out from Fallout 76, as well as some old favorites and one or two little surprises, which we'll get to here in a second. I know first off, it was pretty awesome to see they had a full orchestra and composers there, but they pulled Inon Zur up on stage to do his premiere for the Fallout 76 theme. Now, if you listen to the front of the show, we did have an interview with Mr. Inon Zur at the very beginning, where he talked a little bit about some of his inspirations for the actual main theme. And I've got to say, compared to Fallout 4 and some of the others, there were some beautiful violin that was in there. It looks like a little bit of cello if I got some of that in there. And it definitely had that very West Virginia feel, much less the post-apocalyptic urban modern theme. What about you, Nate? What are your thoughts?
Well, the one thing that I noticed about the Fallout 76 themes that we heard is that they were more uplifting than Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. I've sort of associated Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 and New Vegas to a certain extent as well as being kind of making the best of a bad situation, and I think the music has always reflected that. And so you get these kind of very grand but lots of very minor chords and a certain element of dissonance on occasion. But I found that the tracks that were played this evening were more positive. And again, it could have just been because it was new to me, because of the atmosphere of the way that obviously the songs were presented to us being in a theatrical concert environment. But I definitely feel they contrasted with some of the older ones as being a bit more positive, a bit more hopeful. And it's difficult maybe to convey how that feels away from hearing the tracks themselves, but that was the impression that I at least walked out with.
The whole theme of the Reclamation Day is where you get the hope from, the idea that we are going forth to reclaim what was lost, and you can definitely feel that in the track that we heard tonight.
Well, the other highlight for me, I think, if not one of the biggest highlights of the entire evening, was the fact that we got to hear for the very first time ever the main theme for the Elder Scrolls Blades, which is the mobile game being released, I mean, really any day now, but we expect towards the end of the year. And what we absolutely didn't expect, and I mean, the community is welcome to correct me if I'm wrong here, that it was Mr. Inon Zur who has composed this music. And as they introduced the fact that this was the next song they were going to play, he got up out of the stalls, like 2 rows in front of us actually, because we said hello just before we sat down, and got up on stage and conducted the theme. And it's a beautiful theme. It is extremely Elder Scrolls. It is not even remotely Fallout, partly because it's based around the same general theme that the Elder Scrolls have been known for so many years, certainly the last 15, 16 years. But what's interesting is that it was played much higher. In my memory, it was like a full octave higher than we're normally used to hearing the theme tune, but it still had the same grandeur, the same depth, the same instrumentation that you would expect from an Elder Scrolls theme. But for some reason, or rather for the creative decision, it was different. It was tonally different, and I loved it. I mean, we were always going to love it, yes. but I came out not being disappointed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As soon as the Blades theme came on, that's what I was listening for. That iconic Elder Scrolls tune that as soon as I heard it, I know I reached over and grabbed Nate by the arm, and I'm like, it's happening! It's happening! It was amazing, and it definitely had a little bit more of a higher octave and a little bit more of a lighter beat to it than what some of the other ones did, but it was absolutely amazing, and I can't wait for all of you guys to actually listen to it when the Elder Scrolls Blades comes out here in the next couple of months. The final thing we'll talk about, more or less, is they release the rest of the Fallout 76 suite of music, which is a few different tracks from the game itself. And of course, they definitely fit the West Virginia, the very country-esque type of theme, very different from what I heard in Fallout 4 and Fallout 3. It was very... I'm trying to think calm and I'm trying to think of the word, and I can't even think of the word, but it was very calm and soothing. And yet, at certain points, the tempo rose up. We had the drums in the background, and it really gave you the sense that, yes, this is still Fallout, and the apocalypse is here.
As a drummer, I always appreciate a solid rhythm section in any kind of performance. It's one of the reasons that I love some of the battle themes that have appeared in Elder Scrolls and in Fallout over the last few years, because a lot of it's down to percussion. So much of the music in a lot of these games is basically devoid of percussion because it's meant to be very soothing. It's very it's meant to fit in a wide variety of themes. And when we talked to Inon Zur earlier in the show, that stood out when we talked about how you can you can basically play a game for 600-700 hours and not have the music feel repetitive. It's because it's not constant. There's not always music playing, and a lot of the time a lot of the reason I think that works is because you've not always got it like beating into your head. Like sometimes the best music is the music you don't actually notice. You just you remember the feeling. And so I definitely got the sense of that from the tracks that they played today. But I'm still glad to hear that the drums play a prominent part of at least some of them, while the rest of them seem, I think very optimistic, very positive, and a good primer that Fallout 76, at least sonically, is going to represent what we would come to expect from a Fallout game.
And speaking of the drummers, for the final part of this, just the overall thoughts of the orchestra and the performances in general, I gotta say those drummers they were amazing. They were going to town, and I know when they started playing all the Elder Scrolls music specifically, I know that plays a big part in all of our listeners as well as our hearts. Is the Elder Scrolls music? I about had a tear in my eye when they started playing all the Morrowind themes. And touched on Oblivion, and of course, as soon as Skyrim started, big grins crossed our faces.
Absolutely, and it's something that this is the second time that I've got to experience something like this, and they do it in London, and I still hope that the third time that they do this, it'll be in the US, where you guys in the States can get to hear this, because it's just... It's kind of phenomenal, and it's amazing because you can see the orchestra is playing a lot of this off site. They're playing it off the sheet music in front of them, and that takes an incredible skill. And yet, the emotion, the feeling comes across still. Even though I would imagine the vast majority of the people that are playing this music are, more comfortable perhaps playing the 1812 Overture than the Streets of Whiterun. But nonetheless, it was a great experience, and I hope that you can take this a bit more global. Also, it was a pretty packed theatre.
It was.
And that, again, is a great sign. This is at least the second time they've done it here, so hopefully... it's a sign that this is a popular way to experience the Elder Scrolls and Fallout, and they'll do it elsewhere for other people to enjoy again.
Indeed, and of course, just we'd be remiss if we didn't actually mention that all this was for a wonderful charity called War Child UK. It's a charity that helps children who are devastated by war and by being displaced, getting them reintegrated into their society, as well as allowing them just to be children once again. So wonderful charity, and definitely check those guys out, War Child UK.
Yep, and for the record, we're not paid to say that, so that's just something that Ag wanted to mention.
Yes.
Yeah. Great, well, this isn't my show, I'm just a co-host, so I'll let you do the sign-off.
We hope you guys really enjoyed this episode of Tales of Tamriel, as well as the interviews we had with Mr. Inon Zur. We thank them so much, and the guys at Bethesda Europe for having us out and allowing us to actually be here for this amazing concert. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time, guys.
When Akatosh slew Lorcan, he ripped his heart right out. He hurled it across Tamriel, and the heart was heard to shout, red diamond, the heart and soul of men. Red diamond, protect us till the end. The laughing heart sprayed blood afar, a gout on Seer it fell, and like a dart shot to its mark down in an alien well. Magicka fused the Lorcan blood to crystal red and strong. Then wild elves cut and polished it down to Chimel at a ball. Red diamond, the heart and soul of men. Red diamond, protect us till the end. When elves lost Nirn to men, Akatosh gave the stone to Saint Alesh in token of her right to sit the throne. Red diamond, the heart and soul of men. red diamond, protect us till the end.